to resume the session, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Perhaps you can share one or two questions with me.
Can you give the name of that case, sir, of Justice Ravindra Bhatt, sir, or some
Yes.
facts to
Prithviraj Chauhan, sir. Prithviraj Chauhan.
Prithviraj Chauhan? So some
Yes.
participants were asking. Yes, sir.
Prithviraj Chauhan. February 2020, Supreme Court.
Sir, one question is, all judges adjudicating the matter
Yes.
are going to do the justice.
Yes.
Should the justice be the end result of the case?
Yes. 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 Okay, so let's take that, sir. And very good question, sir. So, see, one point that is so simple that very sophisticated minds find it difficult to understand or accept is that justice simply means the standard of conduct, the norm that with which you say whether conduct is right or wrong, against which you say conduct is right or wrong. And I'll come that when we discuss law and justice, we will come a little back more to that. So at the end of the day, sir, the impact of a judicial decision must be that it upholds the right standard of conduct. It must be based, it must uphold the right standard of conduct. Then there is justice. When the judgment upholds and is enforced and human conduct changes from right to wrong, then we say there is justice. A judicial decision itself is not justice. When a judicial decision, along with many other factors, contributes to wrong conduct, anti-social conduct, anti-fraternal conduct, anti-constitutional values conduct being corrected, and when human conduct is aligned with the right constitutional values, the 5 values that I said, then we say there is justice. So you can say a judicial decision is just, but I will never say a judicial decision gives justice. It can be just because it upholds the right values, the constitutional values. So it's a just decision. But justice only is secured when actual human conduct is changed and is in line with human values. So judgment can contribute to justice. That is why we say, sir, promoting justice, securing justice. But judges say delivering justice. You cannot deliver justice unless you can contribute to secure justice, promote justice. So I don't know if that's clear, sir, what I'm saying.
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, a similar question, sir.
Yes, sir.
Justice is always complete. Is it correct to say complete justice? Are there any differences between justice and complete justice? Or we are just using this word as someone has used it somewhere?
No, sir, this, see, as you know better than me, sir, this word is now suddenly becoming more popular, sir. It was not so popular earlier. Because I've been involved in this business for, as I said, 17, 18 years. I'm finding that this is now becoming more popular. Sir, as you know, this word originates in Article 142, this phrase, complete justice.
Yes.
And in, sir, in Civil Procedure Code 151, it also a similar provision, sir. Now, what in Article 142 and in 151, it is meant to do justice between the parties inter se in a particular case. So what we are meaning is that do an order that will ensure that the behavior of the parties inter se to each other comes in line with the right values. And if there is some in something blocking that, then that block block can be overcome. But now we will come, sir, to the difference between justice and law and rule of law. So maybe this will answer that question also, sir, or at least I'll give you my framework of that. So first of all, what is Honorable Justice from Sri Lanka asked, justice and law always are not the same. People look for justice, not law. They want justice, they look for justice, not law. And they want justice, but they want justice based on law. So isn't there a contradiction? So the way I understand it, sir, I'm not saying this is the right thing or for everybody, but my own understanding is we have to distinguish between the core concept of justice, as we have done, and the core concept of law. We have understood that the core concept of justice is that justice is a standard of human conduct. It's simply a statement of values. It's a benchmark. It's a what is the Hindi word for benchmark, sir?
नहीं अर्थ.
Hindi word for benchmark. In Malayalam, we say it's a Sanskrit word, mana dandam.
Yes, manak.
Manak.
Yes, sir.
It's a benchmark. So justice is a benchmark against which we measure whether our conduct is right or wrong. Right? And so if the conduct is right, we say, yeah, justice is prevailing because our conduct is now aligned with the concept of justice. So first thing we must understand is justice is simply a statement of right values. And conduct and justice prevails when human conduct is consistent with those values. What is law, sir? I would submit, and I'll say this very slowly because it's very, very simple and it's difficult for sophisticated people to understand simple ideas. Law is only it's a hypothetical fact pattern, sir. Hypothetical fact pattern. So when I take the Indian Penal Code and I randomly open it to section 203, giving false information respecting an offence committed. Whoever, knowing or having reason to believe that an offence has been committed, gives any information respecting that offence which he knows or believes to be false. It's a hypothetical fact pattern, sir. Shall be punished with imprisonment. So the law is laying down a hypothetical fact pattern and saying this shall not happen. If it happens, there will be consequences. Now, this hypothetical fact pattern is laid down as a rule in order to uphold, to give guidance to humans on how you should behave so that the higher values of justice are protected. So if in my family, for example, I say to my children that look, you must behave in a friendly way towards everyone. We must respect everyone's dignity. That is the value of dignity is the high value. Then I set out a rule that you shall not address the staff in the house as tu. So that's a hypothetical fact pattern. I'm saying, look, that fact pattern cannot occur. But that fact pattern is actually meant to uphold a higher value. Now, suppose that person does not say tu, but uses a Malayalam word for tu, like ni, and then tells me, but your rule said I should not use tu, but I have used the Malayalam word ni. Then I will say, I have to interpret that rule to uphold the value which you know, that you shall respect the dignity of everyone. And whether you use ni or you use tu, I will interpret it as a violation because it is in substance the same. Because if I say you can use ni because in the rule I did not specify ni, then the value that I'm seeking to uphold through that rule gets defeated. And a man is insulted and there is no consequence. And that man will think, in this house, there is no respect for the staff. I am not called tu, but I am called ni. Right? Now, so therefore, we must understand the relationship between the principle of, or the value of conduct, which is broad, and the specific rules that are set up in law to ensure that those values are upheld, the fact patterns that are laid down. So this is like a pilot being told that, look, when you take off, you cannot take off at an angle that is sharper than this, because gravity will pull you down. So if you go completely vertical, you can see on YouTube, if the weight is wrong and the angle is wrong, the plane will just come down like a piece of metal, crashing to the ground. Now, if I specify some cargo weight, but I don't specify passenger weight, and he says, no, but you didn't specify that, then I'll say, no, but you know the principle. The force that I'm upholding here is, I'm telling you, don't violate gravity. Now, you should have the training, you have the good sense to understand that gravity has to be respected. Now, my rules may or may not cover all the fact patterns where gravity has to be respected. But you must know that your ultimate obligation is never violate gravity, because your plane will crash. So use your discretion, use your interpretative power, be creative, which is why I call it the art, science, and craft of judging, but never violate these fundamental forces, because you will crash. And therefore, when we say we want justice, what we are saying is we want the highest law to be upheld, highest principles to be upheld. Sometimes when judges say that, okay, let me give you another example, sir. Suppose I use that example with someone else. Suppose a little boy is running around in my house, my son. I'm too old to have a little boy as a son, but long ago. And I tell the little boy, stop running. Now, there are two sets of underlying reasons why I may be saying that. One reason is that I'm just very selfish. I'm irritated by the boy running up and down. I just want to be quiet. And I'm telling him, don't disturb me. When I know that little boys and girls need to run, they need to run around, and they need to make noise, that's how they grow. There's nothing wrong with that. But I should go and sit somewhere else, or I should be tolerant to it. I should not assert the value of selfishness. The other alternative is, let's say that the floor and the area is very slippery, it's very dangerous. And if that is the case, then I'm upholding a value of safety. Don't do something risky and unsafe. Don't do something risky and unsafe. And that is a value worth, and then he tells me, okay, you told me not to run on this floor, but I ran on the other floor and I fell. Then I should explain to him that, look, the rule that you should not run fast does not apply. I said, yes, don't run fast here, but I meant don't run fast in any slippery floor, because you will fall. So sometimes, sir, the rule is adequate in and by itself to uphold the higher value. Sometimes it is not clear that what is the higher value that it is supposed to uphold. It may be a wrong rule, appears to be neutral. It can be used to uphold the wrong value and the right value. And the third is that it supports the right value, but it requires some interpretation. So this is where judicial interpretation, practical situations come in. If you keep in mind the higher constitutional value that is to be advanced, promoted in every case, then you can see whether in the case before you, there is a clear hypothetical fact pattern, namely a law, that clearly and directly advances that value. No problem, just apply it. Or other opposite end, that there is clearly a rule that is sought to be applied in a particular case to uphold the wrong value. And we'll come to it in the case tomorrow, sir, where one of the session judges in Delhi, we'll discuss tomorrow, gave bail to a woman who is accused in a case where her sister-in-law was committed suicide, and there was dowry harassment and so on and so forth. He gave bail to her, right? So it's a serious offense. So the question is, what is the underlying value that application for bail and the grant of bail, what is the underlying value that it actually upholds? Does it actually confuse people that even if you do something heinous that results in in dowry harassment and results in a young woman having to kill herself, you'll still get bail? Or is there some other value? So the law, it's a sessions judge, sir. So sessions, as you know, sir, 439, all of you sessions judges and high court judges, you have very broad power to grant bail. But when you grant bail, you have to consider what is the value of conduct that I'm going to be endorsing by granting bail or by denying bail. What is the standard of conduct, the value of conduct that I will be protecting and advancing, promoting? So that's a second situation, the extreme situation where the rule may allow you to do something which actually damages the desired value, then you can't do it. The third situation is where you can interpret the rule in a way that advances, like I said, you say tu or you say ni, you should respect all the staff here. You cannot disrespect people because people have equal dignity. So if I interpret it in such a way that advances that concept, then I'm upholding that concept. So justice and law may work against each other because there may be hypothetical fact patterns or laws that actually, in a particular context, adversely affect the larger principle which is part of justice, or law can support those larger principles, but ultimately we cannot have a situation where a hypothetical fact pattern, a law, is applied to a fact pattern in facts of a particular case in order to damage the values that are sacred in the Constitution, sir, the eternal values. For example, in that case you raised at the beginning, the banking case, we cannot have the application result in damaging the values of fraternity and trust. Those are values we have to safeguard. So then we have to figure out how do we interpret the law to uphold those values. So justice and law must be aligned, must go together. The fact patterns must be interpreted and interpret. Now, this is the advice that a judge would give the jury. The judge will interpret the law to the jury and say, you must read the law in this context, in this manner, because that interpretation upholds justice. And you should tell the jury that you should not. And we will see that tomorrow, sir, how the judge advises the jury on how to understand and interpret the law in a manner that upholds the values of justice. So I think, sir, it is entirely in the hands of the judge whether law and justice conflict with each other or are complementary to each other. They must be interpreted, jusdem generis, in a harmonious manner. And I think that, but you cannot do justice unless there is a legal basis. The law also provides the power to act. That brings us straight to the next topic, the last but one topic, which is rule of law. Very, very widely discussed concept. Everybody speaks about it. Huge volumes of material and books written on it. But very much yourself, Mr. Judeja, and the Delhi Judicial Academy have been giving it importance. But a lot of the academies are not delving into it as seriously as they should, because it is a concept that is directly the responsibility of the judge, sir. Directly the responsibility of the judge. Because the most commonly accepted kind of dictionary definition, if you look at the dictionary, the rule of law, like all of you know, It is the restriction of arbitrary exercise of power. By subordinating power to established law. So the purpose is to take away subjectivity, sir. To take away subjectivity. So the concept of the rule of law, the real purpose of the concept of the rule of law is that we are ruled by law, not by persons. And so the arbitrary power. So discretion cannot be exercised in an arbitrary manner. That would violate the rule of law. No action can be taken without an authorization of power, of jurisdiction and power. So that is why we say, sir, values must be upheld, that is, justice must be upheld, but based on law. By those who have been granted power by the democratic legislature to do so. And that is the relationship also between justice and law. Law gives the authority for action. Justice gives the reason for action. Which is to uphold right values of human conduct. Any questions, sir, on that you might want to? I don't like giving a monologue, sir, but
sir, for those who might have joined late, only one statement they want. Can you please repeat the 5 values mentioned? The law, justice, democracy, reasoning.
Not law, sir. Rule of law, sir. Not
concepts.
Law, sir.
Yes, sir. Rule of law.
Sir, I will. Yes, sir. I will start with constitution.
Sir.
And then I will. Number 2 is justice. So, number 3, I would say, as in the order in which I'm going, sir, is rule of law, which includes the concept of law. Rule of law is rule of law, rule based on law, law-based rule is. But the Chinese government uses rule by law, sir. So they say they can do anything they want as long as there is a law. That is rule by law. But we say rule-based and just law. That means that law that advances the eternal values, sthayi mulya of the constitution. Whereas the Chinese don't accept generally this second part. If there is law, there is authority, you do what you want. Rule by law. But implicit in rule of law, sir, rule of law is a vaccine against personal power, which is fatal, sir. Personal power is fatal. It is like a plane suddenly not having the airflow, sir, to support it. It will crash. It will crash. So the biggest enemy of democratic justice is personal power. Personal power. So every time a judge thinks that I have given something to this person out of my quote unquote mercy and compassion, that's a grave violation of the rule of law, sir. That mercy and compassion has to be established within the constitution, within the law, within principles of law, so that no matter who sits in that chair, that mercy will continue. We can't have a merciful judge, sir. We want to have a merciful chair of the judge as a symbol of the art, craft, and science of judging, the process of judging. And so the rule of law, sir, is a technology. It is a vaccine against individual power. And it is not, sir, that the judge is the doctor that must give the injections against arbitrariness by others. I was telling Honorable Judge I spoke to this morning that look, actually, a judge is not arresting, a judge is not giving bail, actually. Bail is only freedom from arrest, but executive is arresting. And bail is simply an audit by the judge on whether that arrest is just or unjust, is based on legal authority or not. And when the judge feels that an arrest is not justified according to the use, has no support in the use of the Constitution, then the judge says, no, you cannot arrest, and the person gets bail. Judge as famously said, has neither purse nor sword. Judge is an auditor. It's like a school inspector, sir. School inspector comes to a school. School inspector doesn't teach. But school inspector tells a teacher, you cannot treat children like this. You cannot treat children like this. So when you give bail, you're telling the state, you cannot treat people like this. It is against the constitutional idea of fraternity. Because, sir, beneath all these institutions, we are human beings who are acting against each other, sir, not institutions and not some machines. Every single person in jail in India today for and in police custody for longer than 24 hours has been put there by a human being who's called a judge. And the others have been put there by human beings called police officers. Now, what Justice Butt tells us is that we have an agreement on how we should treat each other. And the auditor, the guardian of that agreement is a judge. And the judge says, sorry, this is not how Indians should treat each other. Just throw somebody in some jail, die of COVID. That is not how we should treat each other. But on the other hand, if the law has laid down that you have acted in a way that violates fraternal conduct, you've murdered somebody, you're still antisocial, violent towards others, COVID or no COVID, friendly conduct has to be protected. Yesterday, I got a circular from my housing society in Delhi saying they said we are not yet naming him, but there is one person in our housing society who is just going around creating problems, fighting with people, doing this, doing that. What are they saying, sir? If that was the country, the community is saying, restrain this unfriendly conduct. So the society is appealing to everybody. Please talk to him and tell him not to be friendly, because we have to live together in a society. So the judge is an auditor to make sure that Indians treat each other properly, sir. You're not arresting anyone. You're not sending anyone to jail even after conviction and punishment, sir. The people of this country have decided that, in the example I read out to you, if you have given false information, that's very wrong. You're actually damaging somebody else. You are implementing that norm and upholding fraternal conduct. That this is not fraternal conduct. This is inimical conduct. This is unfraternal conduct. We cannot support this. So therefore, sir, we must understand that the role of the judge is not to settle dispute. Of course, in the process, disputes may get settled. Sometimes it may get exacerbated. But the judge is not mediator or arbitrator. It's not a dispute settlement sort of entity. Judge is declaring what is the use. DECIRE means declare, decide the use, the right value of conduct. The judge is telling people, you have behaved in this way. You disagree on what is the right conduct. I am the auditor of bad conduct and right conduct. I'm telling you this is like the school inspector. I'm telling you this is the right way to behave. So the job of the judge is to uphold right conduct, sir. That is jus decere. Decere means decide, means uphold. To uphold jus. That's the job of the judge. And for that, sir, the judge, as I said, must interpret law in that way. And when others behave in the wrong way, violate the rule of law, behave in an arbitrary manner, use personal power, the judge is the one, the last resort for people to come to and say, please restrain wrong conduct by executive, by legislature, by private sector, whoever. And the judge must be clear in his or her mind about what is right conduct and what is wrong conduct and how I can effectively correct it and ensure the right conduct prevails. And until and unless the right conduct prevails, you have not done justice.
Sir, I may be allowed to put small 3 questions, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, I didn't complete the list, sir. I've completed the list, sir. Just rule of law, reasoning. Yes, and then I'm also putting in it, sir, plus one compassion. Plus one compassion. That is just my addition, sir. Plus one compassion, which I see it in the Constitution. So when I talk to non-lawyers, which I do sometimes on the Constitution, I hold this book up, sir, and I say, this is a book of compassion. It is trying to create a friendly society in this very diverse and conflicted and unequal country, based on 4 simple values, 5 simple values. If we all accept those values and practice those values, we will succeed in establishing justice amongst us. But this is just a guide to us, a mandatory guide. If you violate it, you're going to be in trouble. But it is basically showing it's showing us the right path. So these 5 values, sir. 5 forces, the physics of the judicial system, sir. The physics of justice. 5 forces: constitution, justice, rule of law, reasoning, and compassion.
Sir, since you referred to compassion, yes, I may be allowed to take up the question of Justice Kulatunga from Sri Lanka on the point of compassion.
Yes, sir.
Would compassion focus on the decision and deviate from following the correct procedure and the 5 principles?
Yes, sir. Very good question, and I'll answer it, sir. If you read if Honorable Judge may have already read it, you may have read it. If you have not, if you refer to a small booklet called The Common Law, written by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes a long time ago, he explains, sir, the evolution of criminal law from individual justice to collective justice. So originally, if somebody did a crime against you, then you could take personal vengeance against that person, and society would accept that. But gradually we moved away from that because society was full of people running around killing each other, for personal revenge. So they said this has got to stop. So they said, okay, some wrong is done to you. Society on your behalf will collectively bring to justice, to the right conduct. Justice means right conduct. Will bring to the right conduct, constitution the right conduct, the wrongdoer. Took away the personal right to seek justice. Similarly, sir, when I talk of compassion, I'm talking about compassion as constitutionalized in the Constitution. Not compassion that I feel, but I feel through the Constitution, as a scholar of the Constitution. The pain of the citizen must become the pain of the Constitution, as I see it. And from that Constitution, I must feel that pain. So if you read the Constitution as a whole and you understand it, for example, in part 4 of the Constitution, part 3 of the Constitution, all of this is meant to avoid pain and create friendly relationship. Take the right to residence, the right to movement, the right to employment, the right to education. These are all fundamental rights. The right to religion, the right to freedom of conscience. These are all fundamental rights. The right to social justice, the right to equality, which includes 15, 16, 17, and 18. 15 is the right against discrimination. 14 is the general right to equality. 15 is the right against discrimination. 16 is the right to reservation and right to equal opportunity in matters of public employment. 17 is right against untouchability. 18 is right against title, right? Not right against the prohibition of titles. So you'll find that every provision in the Constitution is reflecting compassion towards the powerless in a deeply divided society, in a deeply hierarchical society, in a deeply unjust society, where these values, sir, actually there is a big war going on between the values of the elites, which are not, we do not accept fraternity, but accept demand obedience and loyalty, not fraternity. Do not accept equality, but accept hierarchy. Do not accept dignity, but accept humiliation. Do not accept democracy, but accept monarchy. And technocracy and in meritocracy. So we have a very powerful elite who are not accepting the values of this constitution, which are highly democratic, reflect the values of the poor people of this country and the national freedom struggle. And so there is actually a Mahabharata going on between these sets of values. So when you talked about social justice, the word social comes from the word socius. So justice that promotes friendly conflict conduct is justice, sir. That promotes and that requires the powerful to give space to the powerless, not the powerless to continue to give space to the powerful, to bring about equality, to bring about fraternity. So all of these elements are social justice. And economic and political justice requires that the economy and the political system must further the idea of fraternity, Ultimate value, sir, as Justice Bhatt argues. And separately, before he became a judge, Justice Rohinton Nariman had also given a very important speech, sir. And I think he's written about it after he's become a judge also. But the centrality of this neglected idea of fraternity as the core, that's natural, sir. In diverse country, core objective of the Constitution is to establish fraternity. So social justice is very essential for that. Social justice means justice that will promote fraternity and equality and liberty and freedom, central to the idea of justice. So I would say, sir, that compassion, we mean compassion as channeled through the framework of the Constitution so that it becomes consistent. So the Constitution has wonderful provisions, sir, and we have got some very good pieces of law like the Protection of Women Against Domestic Violence Act, which is one of the first pieces of law that actually criminalizes violence inside the house. Article 38(1) says all institutions of national life must be informed by justice, social, economic, and political, and that includes family as a key institution of national life. So we have legislation, we have constitutional provisions that all explicitly and indirectly. And tomorrow we'll see, sir, how the Sessions Court judge has given a very compassionate judgment by internalizing, going through law, not that he says, I feel I must give mercy or compassion, but says there is this, he doesn't use the word compassion, but he says there is this document, this law, these laws that we must implement in order to uphold justice. So I would say, sir, that we, like criminal justice and punishment, we have to, in order to get consistency, we must institutionalize more and more through judicial judgments, through legislation and judicial interpretation, not judicial legislation, judicial interpretation and legislation. We must institutionalize compassion.
Sir, may I put two small questions before you can continue with this?
Yes, sir. I need to do reasoning, sir. Yeah, I need to finish reasoning before 1 o'clock, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, the question is from Justice Narhari, officer from the Nepal Judicial Service.
Yes, sir.
How does the political questions deal in sub judice cases? to try under given 5 basic features of securing justice. How does the political questions deal in sub judice cases to try under given 5 basic features of the securing justice?
Yes, yes. I think we will. Very good question to move to reasoning, sir, because this comes
Yes.
as this is a methodological question, and
Yes.
tomorrow we get into this issue more deeply in the context of two live cases, sir, two actual cases. Today
Yes.
we are only exploring concepts. Tomorrow we will apply these concepts in real cases. Sir, this brings us to the issue of reasoning, sir. Sir, here there are three words, and I'll answer this Honorable Justice's question at the end of this, sir, very shortly. There are three basic concepts that we have to bear in mind when we talk of reasoning. First of all, as a concept, what is reasoning, sir? Reason is the dictionary meaning of reason is a number of meanings, sir. It is why you do something, what drives something, what motivates something, what is the nimitta or the hetu or the why something happens. That is the reason, simple meaning. But reason is different from reasoning. Reasoning is actually has evolved to become a particular technique of questioning why human action takes place. And it has become very important. It emerged in science and then has come from science to law. And so it's a method of thinking, sir. It's a method of thinking. Reasoning is a method of thinking. It's a technology of thinking. And it has, there's a lot, we can get into it a little more tomorrow also, but it's a methodology of thinking. And as everyone knows, there's deductive thinking, there is inductive thinking, there are different types of thinking, but these are all different techniques of thinking. Now, in legal reasoning, sir, what is the most important point? So reasoning is simply a method of thinking, a technology of thinking with which we can use to question whether reasons are right or wrong. Now, what is legal reasoning, sir? Legal reasoning is the methods of thinking used in law, usually by courts, to decide the questions before the court. Now, central to legal reasoning is the adversarial system for us, and the plea and the arguments being put by the two parties. So the idea of argument is very central to us in approach to reasoning. Everything must be put forward as a plea or an argument. Am I right or wrong, sir? Am I missing something, sir? Am I right or wrong?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So in which case, the question is, what is argument, sir? So an argument is basically a structured description of a relationship or one or more relationships between one or more things. An argument is a description, a structured description about how something is related to something else. Usually, as we know, the argument has some premises, which are some facts, and then it leads to a conclusion based on those premises. And the argument, the relationship between the elements that constitute an argument. Remember, I'm submitting reasoning is a method of thinking. And this is now, the method of thinking is what I'm describing in legal reasoning. It starts with an argument. An argument is is arguing or is proposing or makes the proposition that there is a relationship between some things, facts, objects, whatever. There's a relationship. Now this relationship must be logical. The things that we are talking about, sir, must be factual. We know the definition of fact in the Indian Evidence Act. Beautiful definition of fact. That which exists, right, sir, or a reasonable person would act on the assumption that it exists, which is observable by the material senses, or is a state of mind. Proved fact is what I'm saying, proved fact, combining the definition of fact and proved fact. A fact is something that exists, is observable by the material senses, or is a state of mind. So an argument in law must put forward the proposition that there is a relationship between facts. And that relationship must be based on logic, must be logical. So what is logic? Basically, logic means that relationship is supported by some existing theory or system. For example, I traveled by air, somebody sitting next to me was COVID positive, and therefore I contracted COVID. I'm able to make this argument because there's a theory that COVID is transmitted by droplets or by air, and if I sit next to someone who's COVID positive, there's a good chance I could get it. But I cannot say that I sat next to someone on a plane and I got infected by his intelligence and his knowledge, because there is no theory that says that if I sit next to somebody, I will get infected by his knowledge and his intelligence unless he speaks to me. So I sat next to someone, he never spoke to me, never communicated with me, and he infected me with this intelligence and knowledge. Not possible. There is no theory. So logic is an argument, evidence that of the relationship. That there is a basis for saying there's a relationship. And that evidence is based on a scientific system that makes it truthful. So Christians sometimes say, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, Amen. So some of them say, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Word, Amen. Instead of the Holy Ghost, they say the Word. They consider the Word as sacred, because the Word is used to refer to the truth, to God, to the truth. So logos means the word. So logical means truthful. So an argument must show there's a relationship between some facts. That relationship must be logical, means it must be basically truthful, either directly observable or because there is a system, there's a theory. So I can say with credibility to a court that the airline put me next to a COVID infected positive person and I got COVID. Because there's a theory to support on the theory of transmission of COVID. But as I said, I cannot say he infected me. If I go to a judge and say, Sir, Mr. Yeralagada, Your Honor, Your Lordship, this man infected me with this infection, his intelligence, because I sat next to him. You'll ask, did he talk to you? No. Did he write anything to you? No. Did he signal anything to you? No. Did he look at you? No. Then how can he infect you with his knowledge or infect? There is no theory on how it can happen. So this is the logical connection. Now this together, logical arguments based on facts, and there we consider law also as a type of law, a fact, sir. That's why I said it's a set of hypothetical facts, legal principles. So if you connect physical facts, mental facts, the existence of law, which is an idea. Law is only an idea, sir. It's a fiction of our mind. It doesn't exist. It exists only in our imagination. The Constitution, these are just half emotion, half idea that exists in our brain, so that we'll be good to each other. So if I say there are mental states, law, I can recognize ideas, mental states, physical things, all these relationships are there, and I can show that the argument is logical, namely based on truth. Then, sir, this logic will lead to its own conclusion. Its own conclusion. Because a coconut tree cannot ripen like a mango. coconut tree cannot produce a mango. Coconut cannot ripen like a mango. So when you say, I saw a coconut tree, mangoes on a coconut tree, the logic breaks down. But if I say I saw coconuts on a coconut tree, okay, next step. So when you follow the path of the argument, makes a proposition of relationships based on truth, it leads to its own conclusion, sir. It leads to its own conclusion, provided it is done rigorously, not subjectively. Therefore, if a matter is sub judice or not sub judice, the greatest friend of the judge and the lawyer is argument and logic. These five forces, sir, they keep, like the plane is kept in the air, safe by the four forces of lift and thrust and drag and weight. By a combination of these four forces, the plane of justice is kept afloat by these five forces, four plus one forces. The Constitution, as setting out the fundamental norms that should govern a society which should be fraternal to each other. The justice laying down specifically the values of conduct that should be required in a fraternal society. The rule of law and reasoning as a methodology to ensure that decisions affecting each other are not made arbitrarily by individuals. That would destroy friendly society, lead to corruption. That arbitrary power is restrained. And subordinated to these principles. So that these principles, which are all intended to create fraternity and a friendly society, are all upheld and protected, so that at the end of the day we have a society in which justice prevails, means human conduct is in line with these values, and then we'll have a friendly and fraternal society. When this technology of rule of law and reasoning is followed, then the judge becomes extremely strong, sir. When the judge's reasoning is weak, argumentation is weak, logic is weak, understanding of justice is weak, understanding of the Constitution is limited, then that judge actually becomes very vulnerable. That lawyer becomes very vulnerable. You know this as a judge. If I stand there before you as a lawyer, actually I'm making an argument now, sir, before you, before all these judges. I'm making an argument. I'm actually like a lawyer in court. I'm making an argument to you, which you're considering, you may accept or reject. I'm arguing to you based on judicial precedent that the Constitution is a compact and agreement between people on establishing fraternity. And I'm arguing to you that justice is a set of values that will guarantee a fraternal society. I'm arguing to you that a fraternal society cannot be established when there is arbitrariness and personal and subjective rule, and therefore we need the rule of law to ensure that law is interpreted and laid down. Hypothetical facts of sets of facts are laid down to uphold these values, which will lead to a fraternal society, and that this application of the craft of application of law to find facts and apply law to facts is separate, but to interpret the law, to give the law. What is the law that governs the decision of the banking situation, for example, that dispute that you talked about? That craft is developed through reasoning, based on legal arguments, which are logical and fact-based, and following structures of reasoning, deductive, inductive, that are also following well-established principles of thinking. Reason is establish principles of thinking about law, thinking about justice, thinking about your decision. So our thinking processes as lawyers and judges has to be disciplined by established procedures of thinking, established systems of thinking, established norms of thinking. We cannot think from our conscience. The conscience is an empty place, sir. It is simply a faculty we have, a function we have of questioning ourselves. It's empty. But our conscience, personal conscience, has no place in judicial decision making or in jury decision making, as we will see tomorrow in those instructions. We have to apply, we have to find the law and interpret the law in accordance with well-established principles of reasoning based on logic. Now I'm reversing the process. In order to, based on authority given by law and within the constraints of law, to uphold the values prescribed, the eternal values prescribed in the Constitution as justice, in order to finally have fraternity in our society, by having a society that accepts equality, liberty, fraternity, and dignity. This is the reverse order of this. Now, the craft we will tomorrow so go a little bit more. Tomorrow we'll go a little more into reasoning and logic, sir, because we are now coming to application. We understand that the purpose of all this exercise is to establish fraternity based on equality, liberty, not fraternity based on feudal ideas of obedience and subservience. There also you can have false fraternity, but we want a fraternity of free people and equal people, people with dignity. And so we have understood, or I've submitted to you, that this is the purpose of securing justice. And the methodology of securing justice is what we will get into more deeply tomorrow. This is reasoning and logic and the rule of law. And as I said, that is like comparing to the aircraft, sir, that the air provides the lift, the thrust moves it forward, but ultimately it is the deep understanding of gravity which is pulling it down, counterweights against justice. Gravity is pulling it down, sir, and drag is pushing it back. So the pilot has to manage drag and gravity to ensure that the aircraft doesn't crash. Similarly, sir, reasoning and the rule of law are instruments given to the pilots of justice to manage the forces that are pulling, of injustice that are pulling it down. As the Honorable Judge said, political pressure, personal pressure, careerism, corruption, all these things that are pulling us down. These have to be countered through and neutralized through reasoning, rule of law and reasoning. And ultimately, sir, compassion merges with the idea of fraternity, because you cannot have fraternity without compassion, sir. You cannot have fraternity without compassion. In fact, at the root and heart of fraternity is compassion, that the highest friend, the greatest friend is a friend who feels your pain, sir. And therefore, I would not put it as a separate item, but I would merge it, although we need to remember it, and we'll remember it tomorrow. So shall I stop here, sir? It's 5 minutes past 1 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
If it's a logical point to stop.
Yes, sir.
So tomorrow, sir, what we will do is we will apply some of these concepts and find them in two cases, sir. Two instances. One is the recent murder of George Floyd in Minnesota by a policeman and the trial that took place. We won't get into the whole trial. We will look at the instructions to the jury. And if anyone is interested today, they can go to the net and search for it. You will find it and read it. If not, I'll try and display it. And the other is a very interesting, very important for me, judgment, a bail order of a Delhi Sessions Court. And we'll see how, through rule of law and reasoning, in these two practical applications, these ideas, values of justice, and the goals of fraternity are being protected and in practical terms.
Sir, may I make one request?
Sir.
I would request my co-host Chetan Singh to email the questions to you as well as me, which we have received, so that we can have a cursory look and take up covered to cover, if as far as possible, can be covered tomorrow. With the kind permission of the guest speaker, we are concluding session for today. I express my thanks to the guest speaker. I express my gratitude to all the participants who have posted their queries and made this session a very lively one. And I express my thanks to my co-host SCC Online, Chetan Singh, Sanjay Kapoor, and all the honorable judges and the participants. Tomorrow we will again meet at 10 o'clock without any delay. For today, thank you very much.